dare you even look at me? You are nothing but trash hired to clean this floor. Get out of my sight before I have you fired!
The insult echoed louder than the marble lobby deserved. Don't just stand there, clean it. That's what you're paid for, right? Laughter rippled through the small cluster of executives like a rehearsed chorus. Shoes worth more than Ethan Cole's monthly rent shuffled past him, careful not to step too close, as if poverty were contagious. Ethan tightened his grip on the mop handle but said nothing. He had learned long ago that silence was cheaper than pride. The spilla careless splash of imported mineral water glimmered on the pristine floor of Harrington Global's headquarters. 48 floors of glass, steel, and ego rose above Ethan, all of it owned by the man who had just humiliated him. Victor Harrington, billionaire CEO, media darling, and self-proclaimed architect of modern success. Ethan lowered his eyes and knelt. From the outside, he looked exactly like what they assumed he was, a middle-aged janitor with tired shoulders, a faded uniform, and hands roughened by years of thankless labor, invisible, replaceable, the kind of man people spoke over, around, or about, ever to. No one noticed the way his jaw tightened. His wife, Lily, had smiled at him even as the machine slowed, even as the doctors avoided his eyes. "Promise me," she had whispered, fingers weak but determined around his. "Promise you'll keep her safe, no matter what." He had promised. Now his daughter Mia waited every night in their small apartment, doing homework at the kitchen table while reheated soup simmered on the stove. She believed her dad cleaned offices because it was honest work, and it was... Ethan never lied to her. He just never told her everything. "Hey," a soft voice murmured. Ethan looked up to see Rosa, the night receptionist, offering him a sympathetic smile. "Don't let him get to you," she said quietly. "He's like that with everyone," Ethan nodded. "Thank you." Victor Harrington, meanwhile, hadn't even broken stride. He was already halfway to the elevator bank, barking orders into his phone, his reflection multiplying endlessly in the polished walls. To men like him, the world existed in tears, and Ethan lived somewhere below the basement. As the lobby emptied, the silence settled back in. Ethan finished mopping, moving with calm efficiency. There was a precision to his motions that didn't quite match the job-measured steps, alert posture, eyes that scanned reflections without seeming to. If someone had been watching closely, they might have wondered why a janitor moved like a man trained not to be surprised. But no one was watching. Ethan pushed his cart toward the service corridor, passing framed magazine covers celebrating Harrington's rise. Visionary. Genius, the man who built tomorrow. Ethan paused briefly at one photo, a younger Victor, smiling nervously, arms slung around an unseen companion cropped out of the frame. For a fraction of a second, something flickered across Ethan's face. Recognition, maybe? Or memory. Then it was gone. In the locker room, Ethan shrugged off his jacket. As he did, the fabric caught on his sleeve, pulling it up just enough to reveal a dark shape inked into his skin, a symbol. Sharp and deliberate, nothing like the careless tattoos people got on a whim. He froze, quickly tugging the sleeve back down as if the walls themselves had eyes. He checked the clock. Time to go. Outside, the city breathed sirens, traffic, neon lights fighting the dark. Ethan walked toward the bus stop, blending into the evening crowd. Another working man heading home. Another face no one would remember. Yet somewhere deep beneath the uniform and the quiet endurance, something waited. A past carefully buried. A name long unused. And a truth that, once revealed, would shake the very building he cleaned every night. For now, Ethan Cole was just the janitor Victor Harrington had insulted. But invisibility, Ethan knew, was sometimes a choice. And sometimes it was a weapon. The night Ethan nearly broke came without warning, just the sharp crack of a scream echoing down an empty hallway. "Help! Somebody please!" Ethan's mop bucket rattled as he turned. The sound didn't belong in Harrington Global after midnight. By then, the building was a cathedral of silence, its power humming softly behind walls of glass and steel. Security patrolled lazily, executives were long gone, and the janitorial staff worked like ghosts. The scream came again, closer this time. Ethan didn't hesitate. He abandoned the cart and moved fast, boots barely making a sound on the polished floor. His body reacted before his mind could catch up, muscles remembering things he hadn't asked them to remember. He rounded the corner near the executive conference wing and saw a young woman pinned against a wall, a man gripping her wrist, breath sour with alcohol and entitlement. "Let go," Ethan said calmly. The man turned, startled. "Mind your business, cleaner." Ethan stepped closer. "You're hurting her." The man scoffed and tightened his grip. That was the mistake. What happened next took less than 3 seconds. Ethan twisted the man's wrist just enough to break leverage, stepped inside his balance, and sent him sprawling to the floor with a controlled strike that knocked the wind from his lungs but broke nothing permanent. The woman stumbled free, eyes wide, hands shaking. Security arrived moments later, drawn by the noise. They stared at the scene executive vice president Harold Klein groaning on the floor, the janitor standing between him and the woman like a human shield. What the hell happened? One guard demanded. The woman spoke first. "He saved me," Klein spluttered. "He attacked me," Ethan said nothing. In the end, Klein was escorted out, red-faced and furious, while the woman was taken to file a report. Ethan was suspended pending review. As he rode the bus home that night, knuckles aching faintly, Ethan stared out the window and felt the old weight press against his chest, the one he spent years trying to bury. Violence had always been easy for him. Too easy, that scared him more than anything. Mia was asleep when Ethan got home, curled on her side with one sock missing, her hair fanned across the pillow like a halo. He stood in the doorway longer than usual, watching her breathe. The apartment was small, but it was safe. That had been the goal? He showered quietly, letting hot water pound his shoulders. Steam fogged the mirror, blurring his reflection until he looked like a stranger again. When he reached for a towel, his sleeve rode up, exposing the tattoo on his forearm. A black sigil, a triangle intersected by a vertical line, surrounded by a thin circle. Ethan stared at it longer than he should have. "You should have burned it off," Lily had once said gently, tracing it with her finger. "You know what it means?" He had smiled back then. "It reminds me who I was, and who you don't want to be anymore." He pulled the towel around his arm and turned away. Sleep came late and dreams came early. He dreamed of heat. Not the warmth of a home or a summer sun, but fire, roaring and alive. He smelled burning rubber and metal, heard shouted commands in his earpiece. His hands were steady, his breathing controlled, his heart rate exactly where it needed to be. "Cole, move," a voice snapped. He moved. He woke with a gasp, heart pounding, the echo of a name ringing in his ears. Cole, not Ethan Cole, just Cole. The next morning, Ethan was called into the building manager's office. Mr. Feldman was a thin man with nervous hands and a tie always pulled too tight. "Ethan, you've been with us 6 years, Feldman said, avoiding eye contact. "No incidents. Good performance reviews, but last night—" "He was hurting her," Ethan replied evenly. "I understand. But this is sensitive. Harrington Global doesn't like complications. Am I fired?" Feldman hesitated. "Not yet. Mr. Harrington wants to review the footage personally." Ethan's stomach tightened. Victor Harrington didn't review security footage for janitors. "Until then," Feldman continued, "you're reassigned. Basement level, archives, the basement." Ethan nodded. "Understood." As he stood to leave, Feldman finally looked at him. "You're full of surprises, Ethan, if only you knew." The basement of Harrington Global was older than the rest of the building concrete walls. Flickering fluorescent lights, rows of metal shelves filled with boxed records from the company's early days. The air smelled of dust and forgotten ambitions. Ethan worked alone. It was here in the quiet that his past crept to assist. He found himself lingering over old documents, names that meant nothing to anyone else. Early investors. Shell companies, foreign subsidiaries. One name, however, stopped him cold. Harrington Defense Solutions. The inked letters seemed to pulse on the page. Ethan's hand trembled as he closed the folder. So Victor had kept it, buried, rebranded, but alive. Ethan leaned against the shelf, breathing slowly. He had hoped foolishly that the past had stayed dead. That night, as he was locking up, footsteps echoed behind him. "Didn't expect to find you down here," Ethan turned. Victor Harrington stood at the bottom of the stairs, jacket off, sleeves rolled up, eyes sharp with curiosity rather than contempt for once. "I wanted to see the man who took down Harold Klein," Victor said. "He's twice your size." Ethan met his gaze. "I didn't take him down? I stopped him?" Victor smiled thinly. "Same thing." Silence stretched. "You have military training," Victor said casually. Ethan didn't respond. "I can always tell," Victor continued. "Posture, reaction time. You don't move like a janitor." "Maybe I had a life before this," Ethan said. Victor's eyes flicked, just briefly, to Ethan's forearm, where the edge of the tattoo peeked out from beneath the sleeve. Something in Victor's expression changed. "What unit were you in?" he asked quietly. Ethan's voice was flat. "I wasn't." Victor studied him for a long moment, then chuckled. "You know, I started with nothing too." "People forget that." Ethan almost laughed. Victor turned to leave, then paused. "Careful, Ethan. Men who hide too much tend to trip over their secrets." When he was gone, Ethan sagged against the wall. He had been careful for years, changed his name, took jobs that paid little but asked fewer questions. Never stayed anywhere long enough for curiosity to grow. But Victor Harrington was curious now. That was dangerous. The next few weeks passed in uneasy routine. Ethan worked the basement. Mia started asking why he seemed tired all the time. He smiled and told her he was fine. He wasn't. One evening, while sorting a mislabeled box, Ethan cut his hand on a jagged edge of metal. Blood welled quickly. He cursed under his breath and reached for a rag, but the sleeve slid back, fully exposing the tattoo. "Holy!" Ethan spun around. It was Daniel Reyes, a senior security contractor temporarily assigned to Harrington Global, mid-40s, close-cropped hair. "Military bearing?" Reyes stared at the tattoo like he'd seen a ghost. "Where did you get that?" Reyes asked. Ethan's pulse thundered. "It doesn't matter." Reyes swallowed. "That symbol, I've only seen it once." "In Kabul? On a man who walked through gunfire like it didn't exist?" Ethan stepped closer, voice low. "You didn't see anything," Reyes hesitated, then nodded slowly. "No, I didn't, but the damage was done." Word traveled fast among men who knew what to look for. And secrets, once recognized, had a way of demanding truth. That night, Ethan sat at the kitchen table long after Mia went to bed. He turned his arm under the light, tracing the tattoo for the first time in years. He remembered the ceremony. The oath, the men who stood beside him, some buried, some lost, some worse. He remembered the mission that changed everything. And he remembered the face of the man who had signed the order that made him walk away. Victor Harrington, Ethan exhaled slowly. The past wasn't knocking anymore. It was already inside the building waiting. And soon, very soon, the tattoo would speak whether Ethan wanted it to or not. The summons came without ceremony. Ethan found the envelope taped to his locker at the end of his shift, plain white, no logo, his name typed in clean, impersonal letters. Inside was a single card. Executive floor, conference room C8, AM sharp, no signature, no explanation. Ethan stared at the card for a long moment, then folded it carefully and slipped it into his pocket. He finished his rounds as usual, wiped down surfaces already spotless, emptied bins barely used. To anyone watching, he was the same invisible man. But inside, every instinct he had spent years suppressing was awake and alert. That night he barely slept. Conference room C was all glass and light floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, a polished table long enough to seat a dozen power brokers. Ethan arrived 5 minutes early. He stood near the door, hands clasped behind his back, eyes scanning reflections instead of the view. Victor Harrington entered precisely at 8. He wasn't alone. 3 other men followed him in. Daniel Reyes, 2 corporate security executives Ethan didn't recognize, and a woman in a tailored gray suit carrying a tablet. The door closed softly behind them. Victor gestured to a chair. "Sit, Ethan." Ethan did. For a moment, no one spoke. Victor studied him the way a collector might examine a rare artifact, curious, calculating, faintly unsettled. You've been with this company 6 years, Victor said at last. No disciplinary issues, no complaints. No ambition? I come to work, Ethan replied. I go home. That alone makes you unusual, Victor said. He nodded toward Reyes. Daniel tells me you have a tattoo. Ethan's jaw tightened. Reyes shifted uncomfortably. It's distinctive. Victor leaned forward. May I see it? No. The word landed hard in the quiet room. One of the security executives frowned. You don't refuse the CEO. Ethan didn't look at him. His eyes stayed on Victor. Victor raised a hand, silencing the objection. Humor me, Ethan. Why not? Because it's not yours, Ethan said evenly. Something like respect flickered in Victor's eyes, brief and unwelcome. Then let me rephrase, Victor said. That symbol on your arm, does it belong to Aegis? The air left Ethan's lungs. The name hit like a gunshot echoing through memory. Aegis, it wasn't supposed to exist. Not on paper, not in conversation, not anymore. Ethan leaned back in his chair. You shouldn't know that word, Victor smiled thinly. I funded it. Silence crashed down. Daniel Reyes looked between them, confused. Funded what? Victor didn't take his eyes off Ethan. Aegis was a black ops program designed to create surgical assets, men trained to operate independently, without oversight, without identity, ghosts. Officially, it was shut down 12 years ago. Ethan laughed softly. Officially? Victor's gaze sharpened. You were one of them. It wasn't a question. Ethan considered denying it. He had denied it for years, changed his name, buried records, accepted anonymity like penance. But the tattoo was no longer hidden. Yes, Ethan said. The words settled into the room like a verdict. The woman with the tablet cleared her throat. Mr. Harrington, if this is true, there are serious implications. Victor waved her off. Leave us. One by one, they filed out. Even Reyes hesitated before following, his eyes lingering on Ethan with something like awe. When the door closed, Victor exhaled slowly. I wondered what became of you, Victor said. Cole. Ethan stiffened. Don't call me that. You were the best we ever had, Victor continued. Perfect metrics, perfect execution, zero hesitation, and zero consent, Ethan shot back. Victor smiled faintly. You volunteered? I was 22, Ethan said. And you lied. Victor stood and walked toward the window. I told you exactly what the world was. You just didn't like it once you saw the cost. Ethan's hands curled into fists. You sent us into missions that didn't exist, targets that weren't threats. We cleaned up your messes. You saved lives. We ended them. Victor turned. That's the same thing sometimes. Ethan rose from his chair, unable to stay seated. You promised extraction, medical support, identity wipes. Instead, you burned the program and left us scattered. Victor's voice dropped. Aegis was becoming uncontrollable. No, Ethan said. It was becoming inconvenient. Silence stretched again. Victor studied Ethan's face. The lines time had etched, the restraint holding something dangerous at bay. Why are you here? He asked. Why not disappear completely? Ethan thought of Mia, of Lily's hand in his. I made a promise, Ethan said. Victor nodded slowly. Then we understand each other. No, Ethan said. You never understood me. The days after the meeting felt unreal. Ethan wasn't fired. He wasn't promoted. He wasn't acknowledged at all. But things changed. Security nodded to him now. Doors opened faster. People watched him differently, like they were seeing the outline of something dangerous beneath the uniform. Victor Harrington didn't speak to him again. Until the accident. It happened on a Tuesday afternoon. An investor tour was underway, dozens of high-profile guests walking the executive floors. Ethan was cleaning near the elevator bank when the lights flickered. Then everything went wrong. A deafening crack echoed through the building. The floor lurched violently. Alarms screamed to life as smoke billowed from the west corridor. Explosion! Someone shouted. Panic erupted. Ethan moved instantly. He grabbed the nearest fire extinguisher and ran toward the smoke, weaving through screaming executives and frozen security guards. His mind slipped into clarity angles, exits, priorities. The explosion had blown out a server room. Flames licked the ceiling. 2 people lay injured near the doorway, one unconscious, the other crying in shock. Ethan dragged them clear, then turned back. "Don't!" a guard yelled. "That area is unstable." Ethan ignored him. Inside, the heat was brutal. He moved low, extinguishing flames, eyes scanning. He spotted a man trapped beneath a fallen beam. Victor Harrington. Victor's face was gray with pain, blood streaking his temple. "Help me!" Victor rasped. Ethan hesitated. This was the man who had destroyed lives with a signature. The man who had ordered missions that haunted Ethan's dreams. The building groaned ominously. Ethan lifted the beam. Muscles screamed. Pain flared. But he lifted it. Victor gasped as Ethan dragged him free. Together, they staggered into the corridor just as part of the ceiling collapsed behind them. Paramedics swarmed moments later. Victor clutched Ethan's sleeve. "You came back." Ethan pulled free. "I don't leave people behind." The explosion was ruled an accident, faulty wiring, corporate negligence quietly buried. But something else ignited in its wake. Truth. News spread through the company in whispers. The janitor who saved the CEO, the way he moved. The way Victor looked at him afterward, not with contempt, but with something closer to fear. That night, Victor requested another meeting. This time it was private. "You could have let me die," Victor said. "Yes," Ethan replied. "Why didn't you?" Ethan met his eyes. "Because I'm not you," Victor nodded slowly. "What do you want?" "Nothing," Ethan said. "I want my life." Victor leaned back. "You know I can't allow that." Ethan's gaze hardened. "You don't get to decide that anymore." For the first time, Victor looked uncertain. That evening, Ethan came home early. Mia ran into his arms. "You're home!" "Yeah," Ethan said, holding her tight. "I am." Later, after she fell asleep, Ethan stood by the window, city lights stretching endlessly below. He rolled up his sleeve and looked at the tattoo. It had spoken. Not as a mark of violence, but as proof of survival. The past was no longer just memory, it was exposed, recognized, acknowledged. And now, Ethan Cole once just Cole had a choice, to disappear again, or to finally confront the world that had tried to erase him. The storm was coming, and this time he wasn't running. The first sign that Ethan's life would never return to quiet anonymity came 3 days after the explosion, in the form of a knock on his apartment door at 6 in the morning. It wasn't loud, it wasn't aggressive, just firm, measured. Ethan was already awake. He rose silently from the couch where he had slept, careful not to disturb Mia in her bedroom. The city outside was still gray with dawn, the kind of hour when secrets preferred to move. He checked the peephole. Daniel Reyes stood in the hallway, alone, hands visible, posture deliberately non-threatening. Ethan opened the door halfway. "You shouldn't be here," Ethan said. Reyes nodded. "Probably not. But Mr. Harrington wants to meet." "I already met him. This is different." Ethan studied him for a long moment. Reyes wasn't afraid, but he was tense. That meant pressure. Pressure meant things were escalating. "Give me a minute," Ethan said. He closed the door, dressed quietly, and left a note on the table for Mia. "Back soon, pancakes later." He hated lying, even by omission, but some truths came with collateral damage. Mia deserved better than that. They met not at Harrington Global, but at a private residence overlooking the river, a steel and glass fortress masquerading as a home. Security was discreet but omnipresent. Ethan counted exits without meaning to. Victor Harrington waited alone in a minimalist study, his arm in a sling, a thin line of stitches still visible near his temple. "You saved my life," Victor said without preamble. "I saved a man trapped under debris," Ethan replied. "You happen to be him," Victor gestured to a chair. "Sit." Ethan didn't. Victor sighed. "Fair enough. I won't pretend we're equals, but we are connected." "You used me?" Ethan said. "Yes." The admission hung in the air, heavy and unexpected. Victor continued, "I built my empire by making decisions others wouldn't, by using people willing to do what had to be done. Aegis was one of those decisions. You lied," Ethan said. "You promised protections. You promised an exit. And I gave you one," Victor said. "You're alive." Ethan stepped forward, voice low. "So are the ghosts." Victor's jaw tightened. "I know about Marcus," Victor said quietly. Ethan stopped. "Marcus Halle, his closest friend. His brother in everything but blood." Left behind during an extraction that never came. You don't get to say his name, Ethan said. Victor swallowed. The order came from above me. That's funny, Ethan said coldly. You told us there was no above. Silence stretched, brittle and sharp. Victor rubbed his face with his good hand. Aegis wasn't shut down because it was immoral. It was shut down because it became dangerous to me, to the board. To the narrative. You mean the truth. Victor looked at him. Yes, the truth once spoken refused to stay contained. Over the next week, Ethan was followed, not by security, but by journalists. Old records surfaced. Shell companies linked to Harrington Defense Solutions. Whispers of a Black Ops program that never officially existed. Someone was leaking. Victor summoned Ethan again, this time with less confidence. You didn't keep your end of the bargain, Victor accused. There was no bargain, Ethan replied. You just assumed silence. Victor slammed his hand on the desk. If this comes out fully, it will destroy everything. Good, Ethan said. It should. Victor stared at him. You think you're clean in this? Ethan didn't flinch. No, but I've paid for it every day. Victor exhaled slowly. What do you want? Ethan finally answered the question Victor had asked weeks earlier. I want Aegis exposed. All of it. Names, orders, consequences. That would ruin lives. Yes, Ethan said. That's the point. Victor laughed bitterly. You sound like an idealist? I sound like a father, Ethan replied. And I want to let my daughter grow up in a world built on buried bodies. The reckoning began quietly. A sealed congressional inquiry, subpoenas, financial audits. Victor's board turned on him with practiced efficiency. Allies vanished, lawyers multiplied. And then came the testimony. Ethan sat alone in a secure room, a microphone clipped to his collar, a one-way mirror reflecting only his own face. He spoke calmly, precisely, dates, locations, orders, names. He did not embellish, he did not ask for forgiveness. When asked why he had waited so long, Ethan answered simply, because I needed to make sure my daughter was safe. The words echoed louder than any accusation. Victor Harrington watched the hearings from a private room, his empire collapsing in real time. Stocks plummeted. Partners distanced themselves. His name, once synonymous with innovation, became shorthand for betrayal. He requested one final meeting with Ethan. This time, it was in a bare office, stripped of luxury. You win, Victor said. There's no winning here, Ethan replied. Victor studied him, eyes tired. You could have had everything. Power, wealth, protection. Ethan shook his head. I already have what matters. Victor looked away. Do you know what scares me most? Ethan waited. That you walked away, Victor said. Not broken, not bitter. Just done, Ethan stood. That's because you never owned me. The fallout was swift and merciless. Harrington resigned for health reasons. Several executives were indicted. Aegis became headline news, a cautionary tale of unchecked power. Ethan was offered compensation, protection, a new identity. He refused all of it. Instead, he packed up the apartment, took Mia's hand, and moved somewhere quieter. Somewhere with trees. Somewhere no one cared who he used to be. On their last night in the city, Mia asked, Daddy, are you a hero? Ethan smiled softly. No, sweetheart. Then why do people keep talking about you? He considered that. Because sometimes, he said, telling the truth is louder than being powerful. Mia nodded, satisfied. Weeks later, Ethan stood on the porch of their new home, watching Mia chase fireflies across the yard. The tattoo on his arm caught the fading light. It no longer felt like a mark of ownership. It felt like a scar that had finally healed. The world hadn't become just, or safe, or kind. But one lie had fallen, and for Ethan Cole, that was enough. The reckoning was over. The legacy, however, had only just begun. The first morning in the new town arrived quietly. No sirens, no traffic grinding against concrete. Just birdsong drifting through open windows and the soft creak of old wood warming in the sun. Ethan lay still for a moment, listening, letting the unfamiliar peace settle into his bones. For years, silence had meant danger, the pause before impact, the breath before chaos. Here, it simply meant morning. Dad! Mia burst into the room like a small hurricane, hair wild, smile even wilder. There's a rooster outside, and I think he's yelling at me. Ethan laughed, really laughed, the sound surprising even him. That's called crowing, he said, sitting up. And he's been doing it longer than you've been alive. She climbed onto the bed and leaned against him. I like it here, so do I, he said, and meant it. The town didn't care who Ethan had been. That, more than anything, felt like freedom. He found work quickly maintenance at the local elementary school. Fixing doors, replacing light fixtures, shoveling snow in winter. Honest, visible work this time. Teachers thanked him by name. Kids waved in the hallways. No one looked through him like he was furniture. Mia thrived. She made friends within days, her laughter echoing across playgrounds and through their modest house. She talked about school projects, about a girl named Lucy who liked frogs, about a boy who cried when he lost at tag. Ethan listened, absorbed every detail like it was oxygen. At night, after Mia slept, he sometimes sat on the porch and let memories surface. Not the violent ones, those came less often now, but the quieter ghosts. Marcus laughing over burnt coffee. Lily's hand in his. The sound of Victor Harrington's voice the first time he'd promised Ethan purpose. He didn't regret the truth. But truth, he was learning, didn't erase consequences. It just changed who carried them. 3 months after the hearings ended, a letter arrived. No return address. Heavy paper, official. Ethan opened it slowly. Inside was a formal notice. The government's final disposition regarding Aegis. Assets seized, programs dismantled. Records sealed with limited declassification. A paragraph near the end caught his breath. In recognition of services rendered and cooperation provided, Ethan Cole is hereby absolved of criminal liability related to actions undertaken during the Aegis program. Absolved. The word felt hollow. He folded the letter and placed it in a drawer beneath old utility bills and Mia S. crayon drawings. Forgiveness from institutions didn't mean much. The only forgiveness that mattered came from living better than before. Victor Harrington's fall was louder than his rise. Documentaries dissected his career. Podcasts argued over his guilt. Some called him a necessary evil. Others called him a monster. He did not give interviews. Ethan learned, through a passing news headline, that Victor had moved into a quiet coastal estate, his empire dismantled, his name forever altered. There was no satisfaction in it. Just a distant sense of closure. One afternoon, nearly a year later, Ethan received a call from an unfamiliar number. Ethan, the voice said, older, weaker, still unmistakable. It's Victor, Ethan closed his eyes. You shouldn't have this number, Ethan replied. I didn't expect you to answer, Victor said. I won't take much of your time. Silence stretched between them, no longer sharp. Just tired. I wanted to say, Victor continued, that I understand now what it cost you. What it cost all of you? That understanding is late, Ethan said. Yes, Victor agreed. Too late. Another pause. I'm sick, Victor said quietly. Terminal. Ethan felt nothing. And then, unexpectedly, felt something small and human. I didn't call for sympathy, Victor added. I called because I needed to know if any of it mattered. In the end, Ethan thought of Mia reading on the couch, of fireflies. Of truth dragged into light. Yes, Ethan said. It mattered. The line went dead. Ethan sat for a long time afterwards, staring at the wall, not angry, not relieved, just finished. The tattoo faded slowly. Not physically, it remained dark and precise, but in meaning, it no longer felt like a brand or a warning. It was simply a reminder of survival. One summer afternoon, Mia noticed it while Ethan was fixing the fence. Does that hurt? She asked, touching it gently. No, Ethan said. Not anymore. What does it mean? He considered lying. He didn't. It means I made some hard choices, he said. And I try to make better ones now. She nodded, satisfied with the answer. Kids often were. Years passed. Ethan grew older, slower, softer in ways he hadn't expected. Mia grew taller, stronger, sharper. She learned the truth gradually, not the details, but the shape of it. That her father had once lived a dangerous life. That he had chosen her over everything else. On her high school graduation day, she hugged him tightly. I'm proud of you, she said. For what? He asked. For stopping, she replied. The words hit harder than any medal ever could. One evening, long after Mia had gone off to college, Ethan walked into town for a community meeting. A discussion about installing better streetlights. He listened. He spoke, he voted. On his way home, a young man stopped him. "Excuse me," the man said nervously. "You're Ethan, right?" "Yes, my uncle." "He was part of that program, Aegis," the man swallowed. "He didn't make it, but he always said one of his teammates saved his life. Multiple times, a man named Cole." Ethan felt the air leave his chest. "He wanted me to thank you," the man said. "If I ever met you?" Ethan nodded slowly. "He saved mine too," he said. The man smiled, tears in his eyes, and walked away. Ethan stood alone beneath the streetlight, the glow warm on his face. Legacy, he realized, wasn't about what you built. It was about what you left behind. On the 10th anniversary of Lily's death, Ethan visited her grave alone. He knelt, brushing leaves from the stone, tracing her name with gentle fingers. "I kept my promise," he whispered. "She's safe. She's happy." A breeze stirred the trees, and for a moment it felt like an answer. As he stood to leave, his sleeve rode up, exposing the tattoo one last time. He looked at it not with regret, not with pride, but with acceptance. It had once defined him. Now it simply reminded him where he had been and why he would never return. Ethan Cole walked away from the grave, back toward a life he had chosen. A future built not on power or fear, but on love, truth, and quiet mornings filled with birdsong. The billionaire had lost everything. The janitor had gained the world. And that, finally, was the story that mattered.